Good morning to everybody that is probably listening to this. Um, as is typical, I don't have an agenda, and I'm not here to host a podcast. There's exchanges that are meant to be done. Irene was sharing some things about her environment and what she thought she was going to do today, as opposed to where she ended up today. But this past week, it seems like every week that goes by, at least for the last 2 or 3 weeks, there's been another opportunity to do some type of a podcast during the week. This week it happened to be with Dave, and I had asked him about this topic and to expand on it a little bit. We've been hearing from more people that have been having extraordinary experiences, and lots of them refer to orbs or more specifically, flashing light. If you've been focusing on the sky, you not just see things moving across the sky that are not satellites, that are not airplanes. It's not any other craft that we know about. It's something else. I've been in these environments where we've referred to those as power-ups. You've probably seen some of these videos where they've captured that, and it looks like whatever that is blinking. Sometimes it disappears, then sometimes not. But when Dave first mentioned CLPT and CLPF, and he explained what continuous light pulse frequencies and continuous light pulse transmissions were, it made so much sense after he took us through some of the downloads that he's received and that method of how light travels through space and what's actually encoded in light. That's when all of it kind of all came together and it makes sense to me. So to me, I wanted to know more about that particular technology, CLPT or CLPF. And there were certainly others that were having these experiences that needed some more clarity on it, because I've been around this for a little bit. Not that I've been chasing the idea of UFOs. You've heard me say before, I'm satisfied. I know that they're there. I've seen them too many times for them to be anything but what they are. It's all just kind of coming home now. So this week, when Dave went into it in more detail, there was one comment, and it's been lovely. In as many of these podcasts as I've done, and the number of interviews that have been posted on YouTube, Dave and I were talking about it earlier this week, that the comments that have been made in every case were positive and like eye-opening for the people that were there. There's no one that left any negative comments or any ignorant things behind. And so, when it happens for this long, that you're doing something that is right and it resonates with others, or we would hear about it. Anyway, I said that because one of the comments that I looked at today, and when you look on YouTube, you see a snippet of it, and then, there's usually a more that you can click on. Well, all of a sudden, this thing expanded like a little mini novelette. And I kind of left it there for Dave to answer, because there were some other questions that were kind of directed at him. But I'm curious to see how he responds to it. Anyway, it's just indicative that people have questions about the phenomenon that they don't understand. The good news to me is they're not ruling out that this didn't happen, or that somebody else ridiculed the idea that it ever happened. That's not the case. So I'm going to open up the floor to somebody else that might have a remark. So go for it, ladies.
Good morning. I'm excited I don't know if Irene would like to share what she's been experiencing, because I wonder if it's not a bit of a theme. Irene, would you like to share? I hate to put you on the spot like that.
No, no problem. No problem. I as we go through these podcasts, I seem to I seem to kind of get my function to try to get a kind of more of an overview. I guess it's kind of or kind of getting a perspective of the all of the phenomenon we go through. Um, so, and for me, it makes my life more understandable why I attract people who had UFO experiences or have been abducted and talk to me even at the time where nobody talked about it. Or like a neighbor showed a picture where he still had photographs and she had them developed. And she says, "What is that on the, what is this UFO? What is those? I made a photograph and I saw them in the field. Do you know what it is?" 2 weeks later, she doesn't know that she showed it to me. My brother had an experience. Years ago, he saw a green light on the highway. And when I tell him, appearing close to him, and he shared it with me, and he doesn't remember anymore that he shared it. But why do people come to me? Anyway, so my personal experiences with, just to start off with it, um, just first going into the now moment, I really see more flashes of light. Even in my home, I start to see bulbs. I've had that on and off. So there's moments where there's more influx, more energy present, and sometimes it's not so present. So I live in the Netherlands. I've traveled around the world. So in the Netherlands, I haven't seen it as much. What I have seen is more kind of those lenticular clouds that you also see in the Mount Shasta, and I see more and more. But I feel there's different kind of UFOs, or what you call them nowadays, because there's different types of consciousness, and they carry different types of frequency or physicality. So kind of when you have like a more spirit consciousness, you don't need to have like a physical object. So I've been in the US quite a bit, and mainly I've seen where I saw UFOs was in New Mexico and Arizona a lot, uh, from metal shaped, which it's, I have no opinion about it. I've just seen them like cigar shaped. I've seen the triangles with the green lights. I've seen them, go all over the place, red ones or yellow with balls of fire, and close to the Grand Canyon, always in, some more kind of interesting places that have a certain geophysical environment somehow. And so somehow, oh yeah, and then also very more like etheric, especially like in New Mexico. It's because the air is so thin, I would say, and it's so pristine where you can start to see grid lines. Well, I mean, everybody can see it. I'm just sure you just have to focus on it. And somehow I'm always drawn. Always when the stars are out, I'm literally, when I look up, I always see Ursa Major. Somehow I always see that, or the Pleiades, ever since I was a child. So there's some pull. So I'm sure when you see something, there's something that's beyond your mind. Something in you is already drawing you there at the moment you need to, or supposed to, and then it's your job to figure out whether it's what's your connection to it, or just to show that it's there. Do you have a personal connection with it, or what is it? So for me, I started to discern like some things maybe more man-made, military, connected with other ETs. Some are military that's nobody knows about or whatever. And so I'm not really putting too much attention to that. I do, it really is more about what is my heart expanding, like, whoa, or not, then it's meant for me. You know, if it's not, if it stays like this, then it doesn't feel like an invitation. So it's kind of how I've been going about it. Yeah, so leave it. I can share way more about this, but maybe it's good to pause for here and see what your. Oh,
When
the sound is
you
up. Yeah.
share your experience, when you talked about how you drew people and you weren't quite sure why, it was always you, and I was listening to your descriptions of the things that you've seen. um, I keep making references to vibration, and you're describing for others what that sensation's really like.
Yeah.
That's what we need to get in touch with, not the idea that these things are in fact out there. Uh, we already know that. When we get to the point where we disconnect what we think we were supposed to know and just allow whatever was supposed to come in, that's when we start to realize and have these sensations that go through us that you saw those things in the sky that you saw because you vibrated at a level that allowed you to do that. You've already explained, like we talked about before, this stuff's around us all the time. And until whatever trigger comes along that changes that vibration to communicate with it at the same level, that's when we begin to see things that we didn't see before. But if we stop too long to think about what we're taking in and compare it to what our brain says is true or not true, that takes a lot of overcoming. It took me a long time to get past that point where I wanted to rule out the things that just didn't serve any logical means to me along the way. And once I got past that, well, then it wasn't what you were shown, because I was shown these things before. There's just a discernment that you finally got past. And now these things are true. I wish I could think of another way of describing it other than just the vibratory pattern, because I keep saying that for people that might not have heard this before, they just keep scratching their heads and go, well, "What do you mean? When you talk about vibration?" Well, there's a you've got to come to terms with beyond your five senses and what we as physical beings experience, because that sixth sense, that etheric body around us, our aura, is what you get in touch with when Irene was mentioning the ethers before. To me, the ethers are becoming more and more in my awareness, and that I feel almost the density of those things in between the dimensions now. There's a distinct difference between the things that you can see. And once you get in touch with the ethers, well, wow, that just opens up a whole nother level of communication you can get with higher levels of intelligence and higher aspects and things that are around us right now, because they're meant to be here. Yeah. If you've heard me talk before, the one thing that's on my mind foremost is the evolution that Earth is going through right now. We watch all the other things that are going around, all the chaos that's breaking down, and although we were told that those would be signs of it, there's been so much chaos in my life that to me it's just another day. But when you look at it now, you see that lots of these institutions are breaking down from the inside out, and we're kind of left to figure out what's going to happen next. I don't want to get into the discussions about new methods of finance. Where we're going, money isn't an object. Money isn't exchanged in other dimensions or in even in inner earth. Things that are done for the collective, to understand what the law of one is and how we're connected to everybody else. We just seem to forget that while we're here. But the good news is every time I turn around, there's somebody else that just some little inkling told them that there was something else. And that's when they start to reach out to people like Irene, because, either they knew that she'd had these discussions before and it was safe enough to have them with, whoever this person was, or just the fact that her light just shines so bright that when people have these inklings, they reach out to her to have these conversations because she looks like somebody that's capable of having a dialogue. When Dave shares his stories about some of the people that was talking in the pie shop, stopped in the pie shop for reasons that they didn't understand either, and they wanted to talk about extraordinary phenomenon. Why was it that they felt comfortable going into Dave's pie shop and talking to a complete stranger about something that was, I don't know the answer to it. I'm just always kind of surprised, and it's amusing to watch the phenomenon go on when it happens so often. All of a sudden, somebody will just open up on an experience that they've had, and I always wonder, what was it that made you feel so comfortable to do that with Dave or Irene or Paula or whoever it happened to be? It's remarkable to me. It's soothing, peaceful, that somebody else is finally seeing this other perspective that I've been seeing for a while, and I had to fight to get to, but it's becoming more prevalent. All that tells me is that we're closer to the point where we need to have a command of all this, because this evolution that we're going through is right around the corner. When I was going through the golden tie information and the preparation that's been taking place on the planet to just make sure that these areas that are being prepared now, post shift, pre shift, are just getting those areas ready to vibrate at that next level, so that when the time comes and the final catastrophes play themselves out, because we're not done with the catastrophes on the planet. If we understand what triggers earthquakes and hurricanes and drastic swings in temperature, those are all influenced from solar phenomenon. And when that peaks, so does what happens on the planet here. The greater that is, the greater impact we get to see. And when you take into consideration the magnetic shield that's been around the earth and how it's deteriorating. I was listening to Ben Davidson on Suspicious Observers the other day, and he was remarking on somebody had photographed some red aurora borealis. And if you understand how rare that is, when it gets to achieve the color red, because normally we see, greens and some purples. When it gets to be red, that's an indication of how close all that information, all that phenomenon going on was to the actual planet, and how thin and how deteriorated the magnetic field around us has become. That's the trigger that I'm looking at. I'm looking at when those phenomenon happen and what we get to see as results. I guess this past summer, it really sunk in when I had seen a photograph of some friends of mine in the Twin Cities that had photographed the Northern Lights from within the Twin Cities of Minnesota. Now, I had seen when I was younger, growing up in Minnesota, we used to fish up near the boundary waters between Minnesota and Canada. And there was one time when we were there fishing that I got to see that phenomenon. And back then it was explained as, that was the sun, bouncing off the North Pole. Well, when you finally come to terms with what it really was, and you understand even at that latitude where I was, that was rare. So when somebody suggested and took photographs of it from the Twin Cities, that's, I remember learning that St. Paul, Minnesota, where I grew up, was on the 45th parallel. it's halfway between the equator and the North Pole. And so when now we see this electromagnetic exchange between what's coming from the sun and the earth, you can see that it's either getting more, it's either getting greater and it's growing, or our magnetic field that's protecting us is whittling itself away. I happen to believe it's a combination of both. That the solar sun cycles that we're in have been elevated like no time we've ever understood before. And that when we see the phenomena I was just describing, now we know that the earth isn't as protected as she used to be. But all of that is part of the cycle. She was supposed to break down so that whatever this new light influence that's coming our way, this new photon plasma, if you want to see it that way, was meant to penetrate the earth to help her grow into the next spot. So, I guess that we're here to help others. First of all, report when that phenomenon happens, and then help people understand what it is that we've come to understand. Now, from there, they've got to use their own discernment and decide, what they want to make out of them themselves. I continue to say, and I will every time, what I know for me. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to pound you over the head until you believe the same thing I believe. That's not how I'm built. You'll either get it on your own, which I hope you do. But those tribes that have shown up and been around and exchanged their information, those are the ones that validate it for me. I already know what's going on, but when I hear it from somebody else, and especially when it's somebody I hadn't heard from before, because really this has been going on now with me for 4 years. Every day that passes, I'm a little more sure of what is going to take place. The only question is when. Some days, I think that we have a few more years left before whatever plays out. And then when you look at some of the strange phenomenon that's going on, flooding in Libya and all these strange things that have happened, that we see them as catastrophes on one hand. I see them as humanity has an overblown idea of how much control we think that we have on the planet. And when we realize we're just 8 billion critters crawling on the planet, that we are subject to the whims of, the cosmos, and not what we think we can do here, even as a collective. Because as a collective, we have not demonstrated we've been good stewards of the earth. We didn't take care of her. But we're learning a lesson. I hope that if people really understand the progression of what had happened to the planet before, and how it all fell apart, when Atlantis sunk, there's a lot of signs that certainly look we're going in the same direction. That was triggered by nuclear activity that was going on the planet when humans demonstrated that we probably shouldn't have been given access to that kind of energy. Because look what we did to the planet. Then in the 40s, we started to use that in wars. We started to drop nuclear bombs on other countries. Now, as horrible as that is to think about, especially when you consider that if I believe in the law of one and I'm connected to everybody else, why would I drop bombs on somebody else? It wasn't just that horror. It was the fact that we were demonstrating to the universe how we could damage the planet. Never mind what kind of ripples that sent out from other places, because it was going to have effect of other places. That is why I believe that this whole policy of the rest of the universe and influences, humanity was hands off. We were put here so that we could, figure out how to evolve on our own, but it wasn't like we weren't manipulated along the way, because we were. Well, now those things are being corrected, and humanity is getting back to the place. The reason I believe that so much of this is playing itself out, is that when people really get in touch with the other things that they know, then now you connect yourself to everything else in the universe. So, you feel these fluctuations and, the horrible things that are going on, but you also know that a lot of this is being wiped clean. As much as I hope that when I watch these other institutions kind of crash and burn, that they're taking whatever they can with them. They're not going to relinquish the control and the things that they've had. They're not interested in that. But it's going to happen either way. That's enough of a soapbox for me for a while. Who else has some observations?
Well, Lowell, I couldn't agree with you more. I definitely see the so in the oneness, you talk about the oneness, you definitely see the same patterns emerging throughout everything, right? So you see the atmosphere is breaking down where you can see the northern lights from a much southerly position. They're turning red. What else is it that science is saying? The poles are reversing very quickly to the point where they have to constantly adjust the compasses for ships and planes, right? The GPS is all off.
Yeah. There have been, I don't want to interrupt because I want you to stay on your train of thought, but over the last 10 years or so that I've been aware, we've seen the magnetic pole move. If you see the diagrams of where it is now, it ain't where it started. And even when you look at the southern pole, it's also migrating. To me, that's indicative of, the Earth is getting ready to flip. And that's why the poles are shifting. So pretty soon.
Right. And it's a common pattern in all things, right? And then you see a disintegration of our weather patterns. I mean, we've always had volatility, but I don't think at this level. I had heard in the news where at some point, this might have been a month ago, we had already had in the United States alone 23 natural disasters that cost more than $1 billion to bring in the repairs and the resolution for it. Okay, that's unheard of. And of course, science is saying we're in the midst of a sixth extinction, like science has determined that. Like as you stated, it's also presenting itself in the government. Government institutions are breaking down at all levels, including something as benign, quote unquote, benign, because we know otherwise, as the educational system. Teachers are quitting in droves, determining that it's way too stressful. We don't get enough support. We've already determined that the material that they teach is very narrow in scope and limited. That's breaking down. Even companies that operate in the old way of, let's say, the Fred Flintstone boss type thing where they beat you over the head, and dominate you or manipulate and abuse customers. They're like, we can't make it money anymore doing that. They have to either shut their doors or they need to change their ways. Restaurant, even food. I'm noticing a little decline in hardcore barbecue eating here in Texas, which is, unheard of because we've got the best barbecue in the world. But, people are like, geez, I could like a little bit lighter in my food, not so much of that. And it's presenting itself in every way, shape, or form. And it feels like if you don't sense that and feel within yourself as an individual, some shift has to happen within me. Like you're not really paying attention. You got your eyes, in the grindstone, not pulling up and saying, what is going on here? Because you don't. And I also have had encounters with UFO. you don't even have to have an encounter with a UFO to know that there's something really going on right now, right? And then where can you turn to? Well, there is just a plethora of information to turn to. If you just open up your mind, you know, spirit will guide you to the right thing if you're open-minded. But if you're closed-minded, there's no opportunity for you. And like you all, I did see a UFO back in, so this is how I am compassionate or have empathy for people that are closed-minded, because I did see a UFO in the 90s and I saw it. It shocked me. I was scared. I begged for it not to come close and to go away. It did, thank goodness. And me and my brother both saw it. And I would, after that, if I saw something on TV, if I happened to flip the channel and catch something on UFOs, I'll be like, okay, let me see if what they filmed looks like what I saw. And then I'll see it and I'll be like, oh, yeah, it has that same ability to move so quickly, right? And okay, so I wasn't crazy. I did see that. But at the same time, after the show was done, boop, I was back to my old life. I really wasn't questioning anything after that. I was like, back to work, back to kids, back to taking care of business. I put my head right back in the ground. And so when people do this, I do resonate with that. And even to your point, Irene, when you said your brother doesn't remember having that conversation, I also, when I sort of came awake to this, I said, hey, remember when we saw this? And it was in South Dakota, close to the Black Hills at 2 a.m. We were driving my parents back up to Minnesota. And he's like, yeah, I feel like, that was just maybe some unusual military craft in the middle of the night. So his vibration wasn't at a level where he could accept that. It is a vibrational level that you receive that. And it makes sense. 2 a.m, you're a little sleepy and relaxed. You're going to see something like that. If you're tense and all that, and you're not open to seeing it, you probably wouldn't see it. Like two people are having very different experiences despite being in the same location. But I feel like the pressure is going to be stronger, quicker. Your job isn't going to produce what it was unless you're in harmony and alignment. And then you're going to have to start questioning things. If your very belief system, if you believe that the government is the one that's in charge and knows best, you're going to have to come to terms with that coming up, right? If you haven't already. And not even the UFO things going on with the Department of Defense. My goodness, what's going on with the executive branch, former and current? It's just all falling apart. And so it's a good thing. But it can be scary for folks that are dependent on it and believe that that's true. And I've been guided. See, I was listening to you, Irene, and I've been guided to focus every time that I'm in my head to put my focus back on my heart very quickly. Because I have what I'm doing in my work would be considered 3D. I think everybody calls them, oh, I have 3D work. And then my real life is 4D, 5D. But when I'm at work, I'm 3D, right? But my invitation has been to stay in my 5D or in my heart at work and apply those principles, and that they would be received better than I would expect them to be. And I've found that to be the case. Just moving from my head into my heart and doing check-ins regularly in the day, I'll be honest with you, I'm getting some pretty good results with that. And I just wonder if a lot of people that aren't coming awake won't be inspired to do the same thing, to start applying the heart principles to their day in and day out job that is normally pretty 3D dense in nature, right? I think that's the trend. We might be moving in that direction. And Lowell, I think it's going to be sooner than we, I think a lot of people are saying 10 years, 50 years. I don't think so. I don't think so.
I had a window of time that eclipsed sometime in 2015. I kept feeling that it was late 2015. Um, Over the last week or so, it looks like there's been some time slippage in that estimate. And although I think we may have a little time beyond that, there's
You
not a
mean
lot.
2025? I think you said
Yes, I meant 2025. But
2025.
at the same time, when you look at all the phenomenon that's going on and you kind of put it all together, man, tomorrow could be that day when, you know, uh, I was watching the last solar influences we've had over the last week, and they weren't huge, not by the standards by which we've measured them in the past, but the fact that they came one after another this last time, wow, that had an impact like a higher class single flare that came out just because all of a sudden after the first wave, well, here is a little something else behind it. And then there is another one right behind that. Here is where I just see it it's like pushing on the earth. And the earth is just sooner or later, she's just going to have to accept it and just move. But she's been in this cosmic cycle for a lot longer than we have been aware of it. We're just here to witness and help the rest of us. We didn't come, there's a part of me that came to support Gaia without question. That's why I'm here first. It's for the planet. It wasn't to assist humanity, but in the end, that's who we are helping. Just by telling the things that we know and sharing it with others, that's up to you to use your discernment. Again, I don't think that anybody's here, at least the people in the tribe that I'm familiar with, their objective isn't to get people to believe what they believe. Their objective is just to help, suggest that you just be a little more open-minded, put your phone down, and focus on things that you sense are around there. The first two instances where I had an opportunity in groups to witness, UFOs in the sky, it took me a while to get used to what I was looking for because I didn't know what I was looking for. I'd never been there before. There were other people around me that kept going, "Oh, did you see that? Oh, did you see that?" And they had like little laser pointers, and they'd point to places in the sky. Well, I had to get used to the idea that instead of me just scanning the sky, because how vast is the frickin' sky, pick a spot and focus on it. It helped that somebody had loaned me some infrared goggles, military grade. So these things looked out in the sky and saw what you saw. Just from a stargazing perspective, that thing was amazing because you got to see stars out further than normally you would. When you look at Saturn, you can see the rings and that kind of phenomenon. And then when you just focused on one area, all of a sudden you started seeing craft move. And because of where it was, this isn't a satellite because satellites don't move like that. It was also explained to me that we saw them in the night sky. Satellites don't have any lights on them to begin with. So the only time we get to see them is when they're reflecting the sun. So, okay, we'll rule that out. If it was aircraft, you'd see blinking lights on it because they have navigation lights on them. This wasn't any of that. And the last time when I saw them, when I saw seven, I picked a spot in the sky. There were 7 crafts moving in different directions, all within my same scope. I've got no questions that they're out there anymore. I have no questions that they're here to help us benevolently. We've heard for years that angels are around us all the time. Well, that is one way of seeing these higher intelligence beings that are here to assist us as well. Like I said before, when we started to demonstrate what we could do with damaging the planet, that's when they stepped in and they started to make themselves more apparent to others. Really, as much research as I've done on all this crazy phenomenon, it all seemed like about the time in the early 50s until now, that amount of phenomenon that's happened has just grown. People are aware of it now more, but there's still a long way to go with others that don't get it yet. Wow, that was cool. Not sure why I zoomed out like that, but
Did it zoom out by itself? No.
Something else is going to trigger. I don't know what it is. I just can't wait for it to happen on a little bit greater scale. In the meantime, more and more of these pieces of the puzzle that keep coming out that help us put it all together. Because as broad-minded as I thought I was, Dave has been the one that's come along and brought some of these other tools along to help us understand what it is that we're seeing. And he got that download from somebody else. He had referred to himself this past week as he wasn't a math student when he grew up. Wasn't his thing. He wasn't interested in it at all. And the guy has since his contact with Kim Jim and the downloads he's received, the amount of physics mastery this guy has just blows me away. And when Dave finally gets to the point where he can actually start to assemble some of these things he knows how to build, wow, watch what happens next.
I feel like, well, first of all, there is a solar eclipse coming in 2024, April of 2024. And I'm just feeling this. I don't know this, but I feel like, 2024 is 12 years from 2012. 12 years is a completion, right? I feel like we're going to have a compounding effect of the things that we're experiencing now. And I have a feeling that it's going to be compound results in 2024. Yeah, because that's the 12 years from 2012.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
At first I thought somewhere within that 2024 window was just get ready. That's when it's going to happen. And then I gave myself the benefit of the doubt when I came across the golden tie information, and it expanded that window a little bit more. But it makes me appreciate the amount of information that we had been given in the past and how it had been archived, because that information on the golden tie stuff was actually communicated to Maya. Was it in the 70s? I want to say that was. And then she actually documented it and archived it away in the early 90s. So that information's been sitting on the shelf for a while, for a time when it was going to come and actually serve a purpose. It didn't come across my path accidentally. And so when I considered that, even when it was documented back in the 90s, this has been now almost 30 years since that information had been shared with us. We were told that information. So it doesn't look that unlikely that window of time back then, 2015 to 2025, wasn't all that unlikely. And now when we feel the phenomenon that's going on around us, and we watch all the things that we've been told would lead up to it, here it is. And it's just not humans adjusting their behavior and watching things melt down. Watch what's going on the planet. Those are the symbols that I'm watching. Every time I see another catastrophe, it just chalks up another, here's another place. Hold on a second. I just had to cut Dave off. He was calling. um, those are the things that to me are the more important ones and the more fact-finding things. When I look at those things, that's what tells me the earth is really changing. And that humans, as much as they'd like to think that they can think their way out of this, it's not that. We get to move to a new level of consciousness, but it's not due to anything that we are doing or have done. Earth is in her own cycle. All we can do is open our minds and prepare ourselves for it. So the number of times that Paula had made reference to our heart opening up instead of trying to figure out what it is that we have, stuck in our mind, that's exactly when we start to connect with the things that we find are true. That here is where your truth comes up. And it's not like we weren't separated from our heart a long time ago. That manipulation that took place, and it just didn't stunt our growth by reducing the number of active DNA that we were working on. There was just other phenomenon along the way where, our attention had been taken somewhere else. And when you watch how society has kind of groomed us over time, that it's easy to see, if you want to see from that perspective, that we were brought here to perpetuate something for somebody else. Our schooling was supposed to be all the same, so we all marched the same way. That we were designed for corporate work, and here's the workforce that we're producing for you. When we finally got past that and saw that we should be more than that, that was when, in my mind, what I was screaming for on the inside was to regain my sovereignty and be able to exercise my free will and make my choices on what I wanted to do. And every time somebody put a rule in my way that made no sense to me, here's where it just didn't seem like this was the world that we were supposed to live in. I didn't let it piss me off. I just watched it happen, because as much as you'd want to bitch about it, I understand that the things that we place our attention on and feed our energy to is what we perpetuate ourselves to get back. And so it doesn't make any sense for me to focus on the lousy things on earth, because all I'm doing is just perpetuating more of that to come back at me. And it wasn't that I wanted to spend my time thinking about that anyway. I really wanted to see where Earth was taking us. And there was certainly lots of things that were, put into my field that told me what was coming. So it's still hard to sit back and be quiet when you know it's coming on and you just wish it better for everybody. That's still not, having been in this community now for a while, participated in conferences, I really get to see people for who they really are. And there have been a lot of spiritually, minded people who claim that they were that. You can still tell that there's a lot of ego inserted into, what they're trying to tell us. And when I see, especially on social media, there's something that somebody absolutely has to get from somebody else. Here's a fee that you can pay and I'll be able to help you. We don't get our authentic information that way. Somebody might connect the dots for us, but I wasn't going to get anything because I was going to buy one of Stephen Greer's books or participate in one of his CE5s. That wasn't how it was going to come to me. And he's one example of many. When we start to listen to all the experts on astrophysicists and people who think they understand ETs, they don't have a freaking clue. And it's unfortunate that a place like the History Channel that should have real good documentation It's just the same talking heads that people apparently like to listen to, but there's no substance to what they're telling us. And in many cases, they're starting to um, influence our thinking with things that we wish that they wouldn't. I mean, look at right now. If I was to stop and had none of this, what would my perception be of when I hear the term alien or UFO from what I've watched in movies or read in books and seen on TV? Like, part of it tells me that there's an invasion coming and that they're going to bite our heads off, and ridiculous things like that are not the benevolent beings that I have come in contact with, that Dave's come in contact with, and most others have come in contact with. We had some dark influences in the past, but I assure you that is off the planet now. And although we still have to live with the residue that was left over from that influence, it's no longer here to perpetuate. I'm delighted beyond words to see the new generations that are coming along that aren't quite as handcuffed as we were when we came in, that they have a command and the idea that they just seem wiser than their years. There's a good reason for that. They just had a command of their Akashic records before they came in this incarnation, and they were going to come here and use it. In some cases, they were going to teach their parents what their parents needed to know to help them move along their path. But that's when, if I stop to consider that generation coming in, there's the hope for humanity. Because I'm not going to change it by changing my generation's thinking.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. And, to your point, have we been manipulated? Sure. But let's face it, if we're going back billions and billions of years and we're talking about all civilizations that have ever existed, have had to go through some evolution, possibly many of them through the process of dominating another civilization that's not as evolved as them, as we've seen in our own experience in our history. We can't go back and keep blaming. Like, how many billions of years can we go back and blame? We have to take responsibility for ourselves when we're in the knowledge of how universal law works, and just say, the buck stops here. It's on me. I've got to evolve myself. It doesn't matter what happened with the manipulation and all of that. It's on me, because I have the power to change it and rewrite the story for myself and others if I so choose to. And I know also, one of the things, this is what you were saying, when you said it, the first thing that came up was, like you had said, some of what you see is what you decide to put your attention on first, right? What comes first, the chicken or the egg? I decide I'm going to put up my attention on this, therefore I only see these things. Okay, so then that kind of reminded me of probably Irene. You've done this as well, from a country where there's snow. We have blizzards in Minnesota, right? So what do you learn in driving school? Well, when you're in a blizzard and you're in driving school, you have to constantly turn your gaze away from the snow. Otherwise, you'll have snow blindness. Well, what's snow blindness? Well, all of a sudden you're driving along and all you see is white, white, white snow, and suddenly it turns black. Why does it turn black? Well, they don't really explain that, but understanding from a spiritual perspective, unless you see something, your mind assumes you see nothing, right? So you literally go blind. Like, there's nothing to focus on except for nothing. Then you completely go black. It doesn't have any information to play with to create something to see. So if we're seeing craft, and they are of a benevolent force, that's because something within us has chosen to see that first, right? And unless we have something, if we don't have something to focus our attention on, our vision goes black. So you're going to focus on something, make it what you want and allow that to happen. So as we were talking about, when is it going to happen? When is it, things going to, well, things are happening very quickly. So I say we choose, if we want to, we can all decide for ourselves. I choose for things to happen wonderfully by April of 2024. How about that? Should we decide to create that? By solar eclipse 2024. Are we ready?
I am.
Okay. How about you, Irene? Are you ready for solar eclipse 2024 for something happen?
Oh, for me, all of the time, everything happens. So for me, I've always had difficulty with time. Time didn't make sense to me. It feels like there always is, like there's always rhythms. So for me, time never made sense to me. So in that sense, to me, how I experience time is actually kind of a field of consciousness. I didn't know, other people didn't know that. It's just my nature of feeling as like a field of consciousness or so, um, where I can kind of feel where things are heading. It's not like I visually, because you never know exactly how things are gonna be, but how it feels. And that feels what you say, like in April, I feel extremely excited. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be earthquakes. So it doesn't mean like, oh my gosh, I was hoping airflow would feel good and now everything's falling apart. You have to kind of really separate from it's not separate from that, but it's really growing into, again, going in your heart and asking yourself, what is my part in it? Because once and I feel the important thing about all these times and why it's so important, because to me it feels already like the earth already made quite a bit of shifts on other levels. How it's going to play out in the physical, I mean, it can still be 500, I mean 500, 200 years, or a couple of generations before we start to kind of function, maybe like as an inner earth or in Talos or wherever. It can still take a while, but it doesn't mean that you already experience it. Wow. Like for me, I'm experiencing being me. Let's say that while I'm living with my family, and in a, you know, you start to kind of maneuver through the different dimensions. That's how it feels. So for me, for example, yesterday I came back from whatever, I don't even know. I don't even remember. So, and I was just walking on the parking lot, and I mean, in Holland, we don't have like ancient nature. It's all cultivated. We live below sea level. It feels like drowning. It's not really natural, but there's a reason why I'm here. Anyway, uh, so but there is trees, obviously. I love the trees. They've grown so big. I've been living here all of my life, so I love it because they're so big now. I'm like, oh my gosh. Anyway, so and now yesterday I was walking outside and it's like, oh my gosh, it started to feel dreamlike because the trees feel more vibrant than the cars, than the houses. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's happening. You know, I feel, that's where I see, to me, in some places there's more pristine energy, and it needed to be because there's, in terms of the earth having made it so far with all the wars going on in all these times, is because some parts of like the vital organs stayed kind of intact, and these resemble where there's still kind of, other cultures can still come in, or had their a refugee or whatever you want to call it. And so now, the earth is like is given like a new life, basically like a new earth grid. The old is deteriorating. Some people are still holding on to it because it's a power game, bloody bloody, still believe in it, but that's gonna really deteriorate. That's because there's so much light coming in and people start to line up to that, whether consciously or not. The thing is, what is important, um you'll be woken up by your spirit by an accident or whatever, if you know, don't wake up by yourself, you're kind of like delaying it. I just still love my wine. I still love whatever. And you're ignoring your signals. Something will happen to you that you will, you know, wake up, but you still have to ask for it. That's been, you still have to say, I'm done. I want what's going on. So you need to, because that's where you become more sovereign. Now I need to ask. And this is where you declare your own sovereignty. I want to know. That's why I always say, I'm not giving my power away to any flying object, even if it's maybe my spirit family. That I first want to very sure, like, are you? Is it sure? I'm not. I don't want to be bribed into something that it's not, because maybe that's because I was born in a certain age where there was still kind of a lot of trickery going on, and so I had to kind of like was kind of like forced, and there's so much more light now. I mean, that's just incredible. But there's still like influences or even like dark clouds, and they're like anger. It can be thought forms that are angry, or manipulated energies. I mean, that's still kind of going on. Or we want to save the earth, and we're gonna have all these flying jets spray whatever in the sky. I'm like, what the hell is that all about? Anyway, but it still has its consciousness, and this is also important. What is the intent? What is your intent? What does the intent come from? Or I want to save you, I want to give these tools. Because if it's for survival, that's kind of still coming from an old. Now it's more survive. Our only need for survival is connect with your spirit. And I feel that's more kind of like where a bigger separation will start to come. Because when you're really going down a certain path and really don't believe in whatever, and it's going to be only about technology from the human mind, and we need to wire our brains up to, maybe I'm saying something very bluntly now. I'm going to hurt maybe some people's feelings, but I feel I need to speak up to it just to make something clear. Because at some moment we have a organic physical body which is divine, which contains all of the cosmos. It is divine. It is of a creator. We were originally created as a divine being which can travel anywhere we want to. We can dissolve in its original state, where we as humanity would evolve into. That's the optimal state where we could dissolve our bodies and travel with our bodies elsewhere, wherever we would desire. That's been our original trajectory. But anyway,
When I listen to you, you describe things in a vibratory nature. And why that's important to me is when I think about, it's hard for me to hear hard dates and think that that's what's going to happen. However, I resonate so much with the things that you're saying on a vibration level that I can't ignore that these conditions aren't right for what's about to take place.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
I don't tend to think about the date anymore. Although 2024 to 2025 seems very realistic to me.
Yep.
It's because I see it on that vibratory level that you've been describing too. I feel it. I don't think it. No one's put that thought into my head. But at the same time, when you've been talking about, the nature of our existences, that we have been co-creators all this time. That if we really understood that our thoughts are the things that become things, then we understand how we can fashion what we want to bring into our life, anything. And you only bring into your life the things that you think about, not anything else. If it was outside of your realm of reason, you didn't give it any thought. So how was it going to get into your field in the first place? That certainly makes sense to me. So now that we have that kind of a a fundamental understanding. It's important if you want to live a life that is free of negativity, then you know where you need to place your attention. Put it on the lovely things that you want to have. And after a short period of time, when you've begun to live your life that way, you start to see evidence of the things that I put out there that came back. Over the last 2 years, I can tell you how many things have been brought into my life because I invited them in. And I haven't had really any negative experiences with anybody. Now, is it that within this community, I've come across people who went in a different direction? Absolutely, positively. And I see how that happened. They're still very ego driven on the things that they think that they need to put out there. To me, that's not important at all. And if you don't resonate with what I'm saying, I send you love and light and send you on your way, because you have your own journey and your own lessons to learn for you and on my behalf too, as part of the collective in the long run. So I wish you well, but something tells me that when I tend to try it by even a comment I made, stunt somebody else's growth, I've stunted my own as a result. And I'm not interested in that. Man, if we're going to get everybody to help raise the vibration collectively, we just have to be aware of tending to our own flame, not worrying about what anybody else is doing. They've got to find their own way there. But sooner or later, that vibration is the common thread between all of us, because we all feel something that we can't necessarily describe in our human physical terms, but it's undeniable. And you feel that something's going on. Now, when you understand that you're just another sentient being, as is Earth, she's also going through these evolutions. We're here to witness a cosmically historic event when Earth shifts consciousnesses from one field to the next. And humanity hasn't been here before. We've had higher levels of consciousness and awareness through Lemuria and through Atlantis and, lots of civilizations before us. And we found ourselves diving into this density to explore physicality. Well, look where it got us. Somehow, something has triggered within us to reawaken where we're going in time, so that when Earth reaches her new level of vibration, we will also be there too, because we control our vibration. The fact that we can articulate the things that we sense on the other side means that we are in touch with it. That's the only reason I can talk about the things that have happened, is I'm an experiencer. I am an evidentiary medium. And those are the people I want to spend time with. It's not that I want to see whether their situations matched mine. I want to find out where I draw peace from somebody else having extraordinary experiences like I am, and the tribe's expanding. Go ahead, Paula. I see you look like you got one in the chamber.
No, not at all. I just want to say how much both of you have inspired me today and confirmed this feeling of staying in your heart space, focusing on what you want, not getting caught up in all the shenanigans and the drama, because you don't have to. There's a lot that we can focus on, a lot more than that. It's sometimes the most loud and obnoxious, but that doesn't mean we have to give attention to it. So
that's right.
Yeah, I'm staying in my heart and I'm surrendering to this. I'm going to completely surrender, knowing that the heart space really is the best guide, and keep moving within that. Yeah, really excited.
It brings safety. Once you come from your heart, and you're not a competition anymore. You come from your humanness. Mm-hmm. You can be a human in your job. I never understood why on a job you can be just an asshole. I'm sorry for the word, or
we've all seen it,
like a distant whatever. It's like all of a sudden you cannot be a human anymore. It doesn't. But people, this is the thing, and I think this is why this time is so important. What you say, Lowell, because I really get you, and you're really like an anchor. You're like, it's like this Gandalf that says, "You shall not pass." This is just force, like, no. And it's not like a resistance. This is not resistance.
No.
This is a force of going in the trajectory that we're meant to go. That's what you're actually saying. And so it's like there's a storm going on, and you're
Hmm.
holding it.
Yeah.
And so and this is the thing. Um let's say there's other I'll go all over the place because I get so like it. But so when you're in your heart space, it allows other people to feel safe, because there's more people who know things. But and the moment you say, let's do this together, or whatever comes to you. I've seen it I've been in so many jobs these last years. I just knew I just had to be among people, and they just come to me and they speak up like, have you heard? I know I don't speak about anybody about it. They start to talk about what's not right, all about whatever. And there's so many more people. It's kind of hidden. And it's just so lovely when you can just feel uh, coming from your
That there's
heart.
more of us out there.
And then it
Yeah.
starts to whoops. All of a sudden, it's like, okay, this is the signal. It's again, you have to ask for it. These are the signals. We start to wake up. This is a signal to our spirit. They're ready. Okay, here we go. We have to keep on moving through the physicality to say, I'm ready. And it's not like, oh, I'm waiting. There's still like these little bits and pieces. And, at the same time, Lowell is holding his space. There's other people working on their DNA still, going deep in the core wounds of the shit stuff in the body, their body deteriorating. It's not like, oh, they're not ready yet. No, holy moly, they're doing their job from where they are at. Some people who are still the postmen, the hairdressers, they work at Amazon to deliver your packages. What kind of suffering or sacrifice they give to still keep a certain thing going, to feel comfortable where everything's going on. I mean, there's so many dimensions to everything, but once you start seeing it, it's like a kaleidoscope where you see everything is like this. But when you start to see like really the bigger pictures, like, oh my gosh, seriously, everyone, I say it again, every single creature is involved. And once you start seeing that, you start to love everybody. It's like, oh my gosh. And then you feel like you want to care. And like, isn't that kind of a 5D feeling? It's very simple, you know? So yeah, it's oh
As I
yeah, and
understand it, it's 5D. Yes.
yeah, and then too, why certain things are important, because there is these loops going on with, whatever people are in the fear or whatever. That's kind of like it's kind of like this. There's this shift going on from, it's again like it can be a polar shift, but it's like the shift from one reality. It's one in breath and another out breath. And it's kind of like, where are you still part of? The people who still want to play out the power game in the, I'm not even gonna call these names, but whatever, and you believe in it and you feel like the only way to survive is use the only way. I'm not saying it's not useful now, but I depend on my watch to feel my heartbeat. I depend on my watch that it says, oh, now oh, and maybe I can wire my brain next, because it will know then, the computer will tell me what vitamins I need. Um, I just want to say it's really okay if you really believe that's gonna help humanity. It's totally okay. But I really know that you also need to know that it is not necessary, that we're made believe that our body is weak, is doesn't isn't capable of self-healing. No, it's not capable because we eat bad food. We're from polluted air. But guess what? We're originally spirit beings. So there is this cosmic light coming in, which is a creation light. So it has nothing to do with the uh, so we have to go within our hearts, because when we breathe in light, we breathe in connected with our heart and with our spirit, we breathe in true original light. We start to emanate it, we start to feed our plants. We're supposed to be on top of the pyramid. We're supposed to take care of I'm going on. We're supposed to take care of the plants. We're supposed to take care of we're supposed to be a guardian. We're supposed to guard the garden. We're supposed to love it and flourish and don't be we're see, like, we're so far removed. Yeah, we are removed from it, from this cycle, but we're gonna recycle as some species will vanish. They're already vanishing, but others are coming up. It's none of our business. Let other beings that take care of that, who know to take care of it. They are incarnated. Friends of mine are, I know who they are. They are aware who they are. They work their ass off day and night to work with the planet. They are very aware. I don't say they have an easy life. They have their ups and downs.
No.
But it's just really something is going tremendous is going on, and it's not happening to us. It's our activation to be part of it, and it's okay if your body is too tired. If you're already 88 years old, you've done your thing, you've older than you, doesn't matter. If you want it, if you believe it and you recognize it, then you're already in this stream and you're already being held and caressed. So anyway, but it's important to know that there is a choice, and please don't believe the body is a stupid thing that we can replace with wires and technologies and smart meters and whatever. It's like,
Yeah, that's not divine.
it's not divine. It's stagnating our growth, and it's gonna create plagues. I mean, I see it in my hope. There's gonna, and I know I'm okay, because the way anyway, I always get to experience in small, so I can know how to deal with it. So I'm totally fine. It's kind of like my curiosity and my way of going about life, I guess. Anyway, so I hope again, I want to show a bigger picture. There is a time, but at the same time, it's already changing.
While I was listening to this idea, this notion that came to me a couple of years ago, because I identified myself with a light worker before I understood what that term meant, and that it's our responsibility to anchor light here, to help anchor it to Gaia. Well, over the last week, I had heard a transmission, from Toth through Maya, and Toth no longer refers to us as light workers. We're light bearers. We've been carrying it for a while, and we anchor it wherever we go. We do that without thinking about it anymore. And so that, to me, describes the vibratory nature of things. That's when I resonate when I hear about it from somebody else, and I know that we're all on the same page. But my lessons and my journey is different from somebody else's. And, I only share the things that everybody needs to know individually, because each one of us has another gift that they bring to the table. And it wasn't meant that they were going to teach it to the rest of us because we needed to understand how to master it. No, it wasn't like that. Then we might as well go back to the idea that everybody in the same classroom is going to learn the same things and we're going to evolve the same way that we're going to. No, that is not what takes place here. And when you take into consideration the length of a human life here, you got 100 years, let's say, to do whatever you're going to do here, and then you're gone. To think that that's going to have some permanent influence on what's going on in the future, even if the world didn't evolve any further, that's kind of a foolish notion.
Yeah, and the universe always works. When you ask, you'll be given an answer, and so be open to, and it's so important to ask what's your specific job. You may have something very specific, or even um, an invention, and just know intent for me to write people, to not be isolated um, in your own place, because this is what this reality tends to do also with young kids. You feel isolated, start to feel isolated, or you're the only one. But really, it's so important then to have your own intention, to ask for to meet the right people, and just ask for assistance to get through, to break through certain barriers that we're very well aware that they're around. But that's kind of also your mastery and your strengthening, and it's not there to hurt you, but to kind of like go go, dare to take a next step.
Yeah, I love that you just said that, because Irene, I think there's a lot of light workers out there, light bearers, or people that are in that like, you know what? I feel so good when I'm in my meditative space and when I'm on my own. There's just no way I want to step out into the world and get back into that course of feeling again. I don't want to interact in that way. And there is a temptation to isolate, and possibly people need a little bit of time with that. But in truth, really going out there, and then when you're put in a situation that feels like, oh gosh, this is dense, ask for help. These are the times to ask, surrender, like, you know what? My mind is just going back to the old ways in terms of how to respond to this. I need help. I'm going to surrender to this. Please guide me as to how to respond. And I think you're right. I think once you do that and you do it continuously, it will become a habit and it'll become normal. And suddenly that dense experience is being brought to you. It'll be just sheer forgiveness. I think you'll automatically just blaze light into it, right?
Mm.
And I think it'll become a habit to do that. And that's where you're really bearing your good to the world. And then you're an example of that person experiencing that. And you're like, I would have never thought to respond that way, and it becomes contagious, just as anything negative becomes contagious, right? The light becomes contagious. But to move out there, and don't be afraid of it, and don't be afraid of feeling that density again. Don't be afraid of feeling it, because you can pop yourself up pretty quick once you get in the habit of it.
Yeah.
So I've been finding that with myself more and more as well. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and too, for me, I've don't know how to be other than myself, so I've always been me in a job, and I know that could be kind of confronting for people, or for me myself. I didn't. It's been my discovery about how to be in the world.
Well, it can be
Uh,
uncomfortable for those in density to experience that, right?
yeah, yeah, bit overwhelming. But then again, I would always feel then, if I would go to a certain place, I would always have my intent, and I would always uh, pretend that for myself, I run my own business. It's my business, and the people that I would work for, they are my client. And so, because it's kind of like that, I offer a service. So if you don't treat me well, I can decline you as a not that the boss can fire me. Like, no, you're my client. This is the service I offer. And I've been kind of teaching that to kids too, to teenagers, to and it's so empowering because nobody tells them. No, you're not being taught by your parents or in school to be yourself first, to know who you are and to be yourself. And so I think that even now when you wake up, it's important, find out who you are, take the time for it. It will come in chunks or whatever. Trust in this divine, in this perfect timing. And yeah, stuff's gonna go on, but it's gonna work for us. And whatever consciousness is not wanting it, it's that's a pity for it. It's petty and pity. it's not gonna hold us. There's such a blast. It just cannot hold. It become to me. But this is the thing. To me, becomes totally ridiculous. But when this fear stuff comes in, oh my gosh, then it's like, oh, uh, then you start to feel smaller, and then it seems like, oh, it's kind of like a cap comes over you, and then you seems like you cannot get out. Well, start noticing those things, because these things do happen. I cannot prevent what others are doing or a consciousness or a collective is saying. We're in this massive ocean of vibratory fields. But the moment you start feeling is like, oh my gosh, I go in a negative spiral. This is truly not me. Okay, breathe. I connect to myself. I feel I want to feel the new earth grid. There's a new grid that's pristine. Then I feel good again. And then this unraveling, it keeps on unraveling. And then it's like, what was I even worried about? But there are these streams of dense things. Like, I don't want to create in it. I'm not gonna let myself lured into that. And I think that's what Lo, you're saying. Like, be be warned, because some energies, they will, they're never gonna give up. They
I had
won't.
to
Some
learn
just won't.
to be an observer of my own behavior
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that I had an opportunity to see where I was first and
yeah,
then decide with whatever. When you said the word intent, that's a strong word for me.
yeah,
I understood what intent was, um, really what intent was during ayahuasca journeys.
yeah.
Because if you don't set your intent before you go into that kind of a
Oh my
state,
gosh.
you just open yourself to wander down places. And so the importance upon determining what your intent is going to be, what you want to get out of it, there is where you become a co-creator. So
Yep.
I'll close with this, because many times people at the end of interviews will ask me, well, what would you suggest, to help people along their path? And I always come back with, pay attention to your vibration, keep it high and how to get there. Well, that's a great notion, and most people don't understand what that means. It was Dave this week, bless your heart, Dave, who said, well, how do you get there? He said, here's what he thinks is that, think of what brings you joy. Does that elevate your vibration? Absolutely. So when you think what brings you joy, you will figure out the way to raise your vibration and just focus on that feeling. And as you do, more things will come your way. Your awareness will expand, your heart will open up, and all of a sudden you'll be accessing information that you didn't know. And at the same time, all this time that's passed now in between, from the time that you first had this awareness to now, wow, my life has changed. That whatever light didn't really influence me before, I'm well aware of right now, and I see how it impacts my life. So the idea that I'm co-creating new earth, I get to see what role I play in that. Any last thoughts that either one of you have?
No, just thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for being here, and I'll see you all again next week. Thank you
Yeah.
all.
Thank you.